we have equality throughout our county, and making sure that we go that from the 7 districts to the nine districts, and those things are uniform and equal. Thanks.
All right, and we also have our demographics expert here, Jen Meacham, who we're going to be hearing a lot from today. Want to just say hi?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jen Meacham with the Baltimore County Planning Department, and I'll be giving a presentation on the demographics of Baltimore County.
All right. And as mentioned right before the meeting, you have in front of you a copy of the minutes. And I think you had a couple minutes to look through it. Was it anything stand out that was inaccurate? No, I'm seeing no's. Okay.
Can we make?
Yeah. Motion to approve the minutes?
In relation to the scheduling, all schedule are finalized for the month of February. Correct.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to.
The public hearing is definitely finalized.
Correct. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the January 29th meeting.
All who approve, say aye.
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 Second.
Second.
Second. And all those who approve, say aye.
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 The meeting minutes for the first meeting are approved. They will go up on the website tomorrow. Okay, so next we're going to get into the meat of our of today's meeting, which is demographics presentation. And in front of you, you have the physical printout of the slides, but they're also going to be on all of the screens around you. And of course, I'm going to send you the PowerPoint tomorrow, just so you know if you want to look at it closer. Next slide, Chris. Oh, and just to make sure we go over everything that we're on the agenda. After the presentation, we're just going to talk real briefly about preparations for the public hearing, talk about the possibility of electing a chair, selecting March meeting dates, and any final questions. Next slide. Okay, so here's where I lay some praise on Jen Meacham. She is a 25-year veteran of our planning department. She is currently the Chief of Research Analysis and Design Division of the Department of Planning. She earned a bachelor's and a master's from Towson University, and she is a lifelong county resident. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Good evening, Commission members. This presentation will provide data on demographic trends and patterns in the county over the past 10 years. Population data is a key factor that will help the Commission to determine the ideal district size, ensure districts are balanced in population, and are in compliance with the Voters' Right Act. Baltimore County is the third largest county in Maryland. The current population estimate from the 2023 American Community Survey is 844,703 people. The total population from the 2020 decennial census is 854,535, and the adjusted population, which will be the data that's used for the redistricting, is 856,673. Next slide. This presentation presents social and economic characteristics of Baltimore County using the data from the American Community Survey. But the redistricting process must use certified, adjusted decennial census population data. The main difference between the decennial census and the American Community Survey is their purpose. The primary purpose of the decennial census is to provide a count of the U.S. population for congressional appointment and redistricting. The primary purpose of the ACS is to measure the social and economic characters of the U.S. population. The The ACS is an ongoing survey that provides new data every year. The ACS collects data on many of the same topics as the decennial census, including demographics, social characteristics, economic characteristics, and housing characteristics. The ACS is sent to a sample of addresses and not every household like the census. Maryland law requires the decennial census 2020 data file to be adjusted by the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission. The census data is adjusted to reassign Maryland residents in state and federal correctional institutions to their last known address and to exclude out-of-state residents in correctional institutions from redistricting. Next slide. Oh, sure.
I just wanted to make one quick point, which is when you look at the difference between the numbers, it's roughly 1,500 people is the difference between the adjusted and the raw census data. So it's just something to note that that's the difference between the two, and it's generally spread throughout the county. That's all I wanted to just.
Baltimore County has been the third largest jurisdiction in population in Maryland and the largest in the Baltimore metropolitan region for decades. In Census 2020, Baltimore County remains the third largest in population behind Montgomery and Prince George's counties. This chart shows the county in comparison to the metropolitan region. Since 2010, the population of Baltimore County has increased by 6%. The latest ACS estimates are showing a slight population decrease of 1% since the 2020 census. Next slide. Did you have anything to introduce for this, Adam?
So the next portion is going to be on race and ethnicity. So this is one of those topics that's there's some technical aspects, but everyone kind of understands race and ethnicity in their own life, but it's important to understand the difference in how the census does it and how you might have a popular conception of it. So the census, it uses, so let's first do some definitions. Race is a person's self-identification with one or more social groups. On census surveys, an individual can report as white, black or African American, Asian, American Indian, and Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, or some other race. Additionally, respondents can report multiple races. And this is true, this has been true for, I believe, 30 or 40 years. In the last couple of years, the census has said that they are going to add an additional category starting in 2030, which is Middle Eastern. It's not the full name. I think it's Middle Eastern and African, North African. So that's race. Ethnicity determines whether a person is Hispanic, of Hispanic origin or not. Ethnicity is therefore divided in two mutually exclusive categories: Hispanic or Latino, or not Hispanic or Latino. Hispanic origin may be viewed as the heritage, nationality, lineage, or country of birth of the person. So generally, you'll see there's kind of a difference between how the Maryland adjusted data reports this and how the census itself reports it. Maryland adjusted data actually combines this. So Hispanic or Latino is kind of mixed in with the other reported races. But raw census data actually has several different data sets that split that out. So just to be clear on the history of it, the standards for race and ethnicity were set by the federal government in 1997, and it was to clarify with some specificity exactly what information the census should be collecting. And as I kind of mentioned, this is changing that, updating it to be clearer is kind of an ongoing process that the census is working on. Next slide.
So here you see the Black population continues to rise and largely resides in the west or northern portion of the county. Let's see, I think the chart before this one showed an overall increase in population since the 2010 census. It's also important to highlight a decrease in the white population since the 2010 census, but an increase in all other races with significant increase in the Black population, as well as an increase in those of historic and Latino origin. Okay, and then next slide. So this shows that the Black population continues to rise and largely resides in the west and northwestern portions of the county. And next slide. This map shows the increase over the past 10 years. Next slide. An increase in Hispanic and Latino populations have occurred in Owings Mills, Cockeysville, Woodlawn, and Lansdowne, as well as the southeast areas of the county, as you see on the next slide. Next slide. Yes, next slide. That's okay. Next slide.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about age distribution, or generally, how old is the county? We do have some important statistics to highlight here. Generally, the county is a little older than the average county in Maryland. Before we get into that, though, the census does track age by 3 basic categories: under 18, 18 to 64, and 65 and over. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of the reasons that we track under 18 is simply because it's important to know how many children or minors we do have. 18 to 64 is considered general working age, but it's also one of the main categories for adults who are of voting age. 65 and older, obviously, it's what it would be considered seniors. So that's that's the age cutoff that the census has determined for generally striking the balance between those of working age and those who are seniors. And as you can see, we do have, our numbers have kept roughly stable, with the exception that our working age population has decreased somewhat and our senior population has correspondingly increased. I can say this is a general trend nationally, but our numbers are still, our numbers of seniors are still higher than the average. Next slide.
79% of the total county population are of legal voting age, which are 18 or older. Age distribution data can be used when redistricting to determine the number of people eligible to vote in each district, which is critical for ensuring effective representation. 60% of the population falls within the 18 to 64 range, which is about the same rate as in Maryland, and 19% of the population falls within the 65 and older range, which is about 10% higher than the rate in Maryland. 22% fall within the under 18 category, which is about the same rate as the rate in Maryland. Next slide. This map shows concentrations of under 18 population where a focus on child services is needed. Next slide. This map shows concentrations of the population between the ages of 18 through 64, the working age population, where a focus for providing a range of lifestyle needs with a mixed income community exists. There seems to be concentrations on both the east and west side, as well as Cockeysville and Arbutus. Next slide. This map shows concentrations of senior populations in central and western Baltimore County, where a focus on senior services is needed. Next slide.
So before we get into economic data, are there any questions about the two general topics we've covered so far? No? Okay. So the next group of information is generally economic data. We have, the census does track household income through but they do it through the ACS. I don't believe, it's not asked in the census, right? Okay. Regardless, the information that you see here is ACS data, so it is a little bit more current than 2020. We do have okay. So there's two important things to understand about household income. One,
For everyone else, could you explain what ACS is?
American Community Survey. It is a survey conducted by the Census Bureau. I believe it's every year. They send out a sampling of 3.5 million, a sample survey to 3.5 million houses, and use a blend of modeling to kind of extrapolate the answers to general population.
Many times it's not as expansive in terms of the broader population as a regular decennial census, but it does zero in on specific topics in different years throughout that 10-year period.
And just for the public, that survey is given to the people that are on the deed, correct?
And that is actually a Jen question.
It's sent to addresses, certain addresses, not every household, just certain addresses that are randomly chosen.
So the households are randomly chosen. We're getting data from households that are randomly chosen. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
It's not just deeded property owners, it can be renters as well.
Okay, thank you.
So there's two factors to household income. One is the size of the household, and the other is individual income. Generally, the average household size in Baltimore County is 2.51 people per household. That is slightly lower than the average for Maryland, which is 2.6 people, but it is right in line with the overall U.S. average, which is 2.51. So the median household income for Baltimore County is $87,000, which is slightly lower than the overall median household income for Maryland of $98,000 but is higher than the US average of 77. Next slide.
The darker colors on this map represent census tracts with a lower median household income. Next slide. The average household size is the average number of people inhabiting a single dwelling. The average household size is calculated by dividing the household population per area by the number of occupied households in that same area. Household size is a key determinant of housing demand and supply and resulting housing density. This map shows the average household size by census tract. Next slide. The per capita income is the average income of a person in a specific area, calculated by dividing the total income of the area by its total population. Per capita income is a common metric used to compare average income across geographies like cities, states, or countries. Baltimore County is slightly higher than both Maryland and the US per capita income. Next slide. The darker colors on this map represent census tracts with a lower average per capita income. Next slide. The Census Bureau calculates the unemployment rate by surveying households and then providing the data to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics uses this data to calculate the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate represents the number of unemployed people as a percentage of the labor force. The darker colors on this map represent census tracts with higher unemployment rates. Next slide. This map shows the major employers in Baltimore County and the locations of those major employers. Next slide. This map shows the most prominent employment industries for each councilmatic district. And employment industry is data about businesses categorized by type, which uses the NAICS codes. The NAICS, or North American Industrial Classification System codes, are a standardized system used by government agencies and businesses in North America to classify and categorize business and industries. Next slide. The federal poverty level is updated annually by the Department of Health and Human Services using the Consumer Price Index to adjust for inflation, ensuring the poverty thresholds reflect current economic conditions. The poverty level is calculated based on the size of the household. For example, the poverty level for a family of 4 would be higher than for a single individual. The official poverty threshold is the same across the US, but some programs use poverty guidelines that adjust for the cost of living in different states. Once the federal poverty level is established, it's used to determine eligibility for many programs like Head Start, SNAP, and the National School Lunch Program. Typically, if an individual or a family's income is below a certain percentage of the federal poverty level, they may qualify for financial assistance. Next slide. The poverty rate refers to the percentage of people in Baltimore County or a specific population whose income is below the federal poverty level. It is a statistical measurement that qualifies the portion of the people living in poverty, and it is derived from data on income levels and the federal poverty level. There are 9.7% of people who live below the poverty level in Baltimore County. Next slide. Approximately 9% of children live below poverty and 10% of seniors live below poverty in Baltimore County. Next slide. The darker colors on this map represent census tracts with a higher poverty rate. Next slide.
So the next few slides are on education. And as you can see, Baltimore County does have a very high high school graduation rate of nearly 92%. This is about the same as Maryland and is slightly higher than the United States, which has an 89 0.8% high school graduation rate. We also have a much higher rate of bachelor's degree or college, people who hold college degrees. In Baltimore County, it's 42.7% of the population holds a bachelor's or higher. This is about the same for Maryland, but is 20 points higher than the United States average. Next slide.
This chart shows the breakdown of population that is 25 years or older by the highest levels of education. This data helps to understand the educational disparities between districts, which can influence the kinds of services or policies that are prioritized, such as school funding or adult education programs. Next slide. The darker colors on this map represent census tracts with greater numbers of the population of age 25 and older who have a bachelor's degree or higher. Next slide.
So one of the aspects that doesn't fit quite neatly with the economic data, but is still very important, that is tracked by the Census Bureau, is spoken language. In general, this means people within a household who speak a language other than English. In Baltimore County, that rate is 16.6%. Which is lower than the average for Maryland, which is at 21%, and much lower than the United States as a whole, which has about 22.5% of people who speak a language other than English at home. Next slide.
The darker colors on this map represent census tracts with a greater number of people who speak a language other than English at home. The purpose of knowing the language spoken at home is to help identify districts where English-speaking populations may require specific language assistance, especially in the voting process. Next slide.
Okay. So we touched on this topic last week as kind of an introductory, but this is where we actually get to see and kind of delve into census designated places. So in general, census designated places, or CDPs, are statistical geographic areas used by the Census Bureau to represent a concentrated population that is not in a legally incorporated municipality. Meaning it doesn't have its own local government, but it's still recognized as a community with its own distinct name. It's basically the statistical equivalent of a municipality. It's important to recognize that 89% of the county's population lives within a CDP. Next slide.
There are 32 census-designated places in Baltimore County. Unlike a city or a town, a census-designated place does not have a functioning government structure or a legally defined boundary. CDPs are used solely for collecting and analyzing census data, providing information about population densities in unincorporated areas. The Census Bureau determines the boundaries of a CDP based on local recognition and population concentrations, often in consult with the state and local officials. Boundaries should follow visible features such as roads, rivers, railroads, or non-visible features such as parcel boundaries, adjacent incorporated place boundaries, or other Census Bureau geographies. Data that is reviewed with a census-designated place is when it's being mapped include population size, housing density, and other demographic factors. Last slide. And that concludes the presentation.
I'm assuming that the data you use for this is how you came up with the suggested map? Or is this the current data that the current map is on?
when you say the suggested map, do you mean the one from Bill 4724? We used, there was some discussion of CDPs, but there was also, it primarily was the adjusted census information from the Maryland Department of Planning. But, I mean, we did look at CDPs. We looked at school boundaries. Wasn't really much zip codes, but yeah. So we did use some of this at that when the council was.
So could you tell me what categories you used for the suggested map? Like, did you use the income and did you use those items?
So before we get too deep into the suggested map, I just want to point out that the point of this exercise is actually kind of to start from scratch.
Got you.
Without using that suggested map and see what you guys can come up with using, using fresh data.
Got you. Okay. That's why I was asking.
Can I ask a question really quick? Thank you very much, Ms. Meacham, for all this wonderful information. You've provided us with a lot of information about data points, what the county looks like, different demographics across the county. Can you give us a better understanding of how we should utilize this information as we take on the endeavor of drawing the different districts across the county?
Most of this data is going to be available in the software that you use to create your districts. So when you are creating the districts, these are things to look for to make sure when you are redrawing the districts that they're drawn fairly.
So when you are doing this, you will, the main things you'll keep in mind are what the charter requirements are, which is you have to have districts. We're going to go from 7 to 9, so you're going to obviously add 2 more districts. They're going to have to be compact, contiguous, and substantially equal in population. Those are the 3 basics. There is also a provision that says, while also giving due regard to communities. That's I guess a fancy way of saying, don't forget about the neighborhoods when you're doing this exercise of making them compact, contiguous, and just about the same amount of people in each one, voting age population. But to the extent you can, try to keep communities together if you can. And then with all of that, you're also going to be making sure that the Voting Rights Act is complied with. So, and this information really should assist you in doing all of that. Obviously, the demographic or the race and ethnicity population is going to assist you in dealing with the Voting Rights Act, but all of this will assist you in trying to make sure that your districts are compact, contiguous, and similar in population. So those are really kind of the big 4 of the compact, contiguous population Voting Rights Act. And then, you'll to the extent you can, I mean, if I say this tongue in cheek, but if you all are really good, then you can probably start getting even more into the details of some of these other factors, such as economics and voting or age, things like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
There is one other aspect to it. It's not just a physical location aspect to community, but a commonality of problems to be represented for. I know that was a little strangely worded, but what I'm trying to point out is that sometimes communities can have common issues that span across physical distances. for example, you'll notice, minority populations of Hispanic and Latino. There's a lot of overlap between that population and the population who speak a different language at home, and that's because people who speak only Spanish are probably one of the higher populations of that non-English speaking group. But there's pockets of those communities throughout the county. I'm not saying that the job is to meld those together. I'm just saying that it's something to think about. It's an illustration of the fact that community can mean commonality of circumstance in addition to proximity to each other.
Ms. Meacham, I have a definitional question. Back in the slide showing employment data, one of the categories was healthcare and social assistance. And I'd like a better definition of what the social assistance category represents.
That's how the NAICS defines their categories. I can send you information on how those are defined. There's different, they have like a main category and then they go into detailed levels of every category.
Categories, yeah.
So it's a 6-digit code, but then it goes into greater detail as you get farther into the code. So I can give you information on how they
Yeah, that'd be
define
great
those
if you could
industries.
send it to Adam and Adam can
Yes.
disperse it to everybody.
Could you also, when you guys are using abbreviations, some people might be listening, they don't know what they mean. So NI.
Yeah,
stands
so
for?
that, I think I had said that that's the North American, I don't even know what it is. I'd have to look. Let me find it. I don't use this data as often as Economic Development Office uses it. Do you have it? The North American Industry Classification System. That's how they classify employment sectors or industries.
Yes, thank you. And I know, Tom, you spoke about the charter requirements. Can you actually clarify what those requirements are for people listening? Because I'm thinking that people may have questions about what those requirements are.
Sure. So the county charter, this redistricting endeavor is a combination of legal requirements, and there are essentially the county charter requirements, and then there are other requirements, other legal requirements, including the Voting Rights Act. That's probably the most prevalent legal requirement beyond what the charter itself requires. And the county charter itself requires that the new districts that are being drawn be compact, which means it kind of what the definition in the dictionary would be of these words. Compact, contiguous, which means they have to be connected. They can cross little rivers or little streams or tributaries, but they can't cross the Chesapeake Bay. They can't cross even really the Patapsco River. So we wouldn't be able to have Dundalk and Arbutus really in the same district, for example. And so they have to connect by and large. And then they have to be substantially equal in population, each district. So we can't have, if we have 844,000 people, well, actually 856,000 upon which this is going to be based, you can't have one district that's 120,000 and another district that's 80,000. You just can't have that much of a spread. That the courts would say that's not substantially equal in population. It doesn't have to be perfect. We use a metric of within 5%. Either way, it can be, so one district can be as long as the districts high and low are within 10% of each other, that's okay. We strive for 5% because that's pretty much a guarantee that they'll be substantially equal. So that's what the charter requires. And then the other component that I mentioned is also giving due regard to communities. And that means making sure that to the extent possible, and I would say this is more of a soft legal requirement because it's probably going to be, and I know most communities probably wouldn't agree with this, but it's just kind of the legal reality. It's probably going to get the least amount of weight when looking at, if a court were to ever look at whether a redistricting scheme is valid or not, because it is a little bit subjective, and the county doesn't really have, other than the census designated places, we don't have specific towns or municipalities. So it's going to be something that people find very important, and it is very important, but it's hard to, for lack of a better way to say this, it's hard to get it all. And if something has to be, massaged in the best way possible, that's probably the one that is. And I don't want everyone who's listening or watching to say the county doesn't care about communities, because that's not it at all. It's just, when you get to do an exercise like this and you're trying to please everybody, it's just impossible to do that. And then finally, the Voting Rights Act plays a major role in this because, we have to, but we want to. Our intention is to make districts that are that give candidates, not candidates really, that give voters the ability to select their candidates of choice. And the way you do that is and we'll get into the legal aspects of the Voting Rights Act later, but you don't want to pack certain races, or you don't want to splinter certain races so they don't have a chance. And that's not to say every race or ethnicity votes exactly with its own race and ethnicity. And in fact, over time, I think we found, at least in the county, that we've gotten more cohesive in terms of, especially the last election. It's very relevant, but it's becoming, and this is a good thing, people are voting for candidates and not so much race or ethnicity. That's not to say it doesn't happen at all. In fact, it does. But you've got to, when making these maps, you take into consideration the Voting Rights Act, because again, you want to give residents the opportunity to pick candidates of their choice and have those candidates have an opportunity to be successful.
Thank you. I wanted you to clarify, because I feel like there's questions, and rightfully so, people have questions, but I wanted to make sure that everyone listening and watching understands the requirements that we're here to do and feel. Because I think sometimes it's murky where people do not understand, and that's why I asked for clarification. And as I said, when we're giving abbreviations, to actually say what they are, because again, people listening may not know where the data is coming from or what it is. So that's why, but I appreciate you answering the question. Thank you.
I guess I do have a question as well in regards to the demo. So in our previous map, obviously it was ratified. What were the 3 to 4 biggest controlling factors in drafting this 7-1-24 map?
So okay, I would say probably the biggest factor was the political performance of the districts, and that was intentional, because as I'm sure you're all aware, it was a bipartisan coalition of 5 members of the council that actually approved 4724. And while, and yeah,
So the other thing I should have mentioned, Ms. Tate Duffy, in answer to your last question was, and as part of this whole process, and I think this is obvious, but it should be stated, part of this process is a very political process. You know, we have Democrats wanting to elect more Democrats, and we have Republicans wanting to elect more Republicans. So, but in order to pass a map in Baltimore County, you need 5 votes. And as long as you have a 4-3 county council, you need bipartisanship and cooperation. Even though those desires are the same. The Democrats want to elect more Democrats, and the Republicans want to elect more Republicans, and that's just that's a natural political thing. And so in redistricting, I guess in answer to your question that you, of Adam, or in answer to yours, we took into account the factors of redistricting in the charter that I mentioned. We also took into account what the Voting Rights Act requires, but then political performance was sort of the overarching aspect of it as well. So those are, I think, primarily what we relied on when we created the map with 4724. We created 9 districts. They're all, you know, they meet all of the charter requirements, and we believe the Voting Rights Act requirements. But, you know, it's like you can't please all of the people all of the time, as I discussed earlier, with communities and district boundaries, and you know, a community that's been in one district for years and years and all of a sudden is in another district. So, you know, most people, that's their most important aspect of this whole thing is, why am I here when I was here yesterday? And they don't really tend to, I don't want to say don't care, but they don't, you know, their first concern is not these other things. It's, you know, why I had this council person as my representative, and I've been in District 3 or 2 for years, and now I'm in District 4, or now I'm in District 1, and that's something that we have to grapple with too, that you all have to grapple with.
there were also regional or local factors that also played pretty heavily. One in particular was the question of representation for the waterfront on the eastern side of the county. It had, for decades, been split pretty unevenly, or haphazardly is maybe a better way to put it, between 2 or 3 districts. And one of the goals was to actually make sure that after you got past Dundalk, the waterfront communities all had the same representation. And this is kind of an example of how we did weave other aspects into it, like looking at CDPs, looking at commonality of problems in communities. You know, the waterfront communities do tend to have very specific issues that don't appear anywhere else in the county. Another kind of regional or local aspect was keeping Towson and Parkville together, because those 2 communities are very similar in the types of problem. Now, I'm not saying that people from Towson and Parkville will get along, but they have the density of those areas is very similar. You know, rates of poverty and you know, household size, household income are very similar. So they, in a lot of ways, representation of those 2 areas, you know, shares a lot of commonality. Yeah, a lot of similar housing issues, types. Examples of where this kind of got a little stressed would probably be in the Pikesville Garrison area. This is more my personal observation. I found, because of the unique structure of Baltimore County, when you start getting around the corners of the city-county line, you know, in the Pikesville area and the Parkville Overley area, it gets kind of hard to draw neat lines, simply because usually there's some major thoroughfares that have a lot of population, and there tends to be some political considerations around those corners. And you know, another basic regional consideration was how to keep, the best way to put it is District 1 together. You know, some of you might be aware that the state legislative map kind of creates stripes in this area. And one of the goals was to make sure that the communities of Baltimore Highlands, Arbutus, Catonsville, they all share the same representation rather than being split among 2 or 3 different county representatives.
So I'm curious, because I live in Arbutus and Helthorpe. I'm curious about that specifically because the current map, you moved Woodlawn into the zone. So I'm just curious, what was the decision-making amongst that? Because right now, as it stands, our delegates is the same person. Our senator is the same person. What was the difference when creating the 7124 map?
So District 1 actually is kind of an interesting case study because when you look at District 1 from the previous map, the 7-member map that was passed in 2022, that district is almost exactly the ideal size, meaning it's when you take the county population divided by 7, it's pretty much that answer. It's also very closely mirrors the demographics of the county as a whole. Now, it in part has that because it has a large white population in the Highlands, Arbutus, Lansdowne area, but also a very large black population in Woodlawn. The problem that we found is that the unique geography means that you cannot reduce the population without going through Woodlawn. It's literally landlocked. So the only place to remove population, because from going from 7 to 9, each district had to lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 people. There was nowhere else to take from but Woodlawn because you had, like it was kind of just the reality of our geography. I mean, you can minimize it, but, and like that was one of the other things. Keeping Security Square Mall in District 1. That was a big consideration.
So with regards to, sorry, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your question. With regards to these redistricting and the changing of the border to create these unique borders, we have the CDP. We have the CDP, which changes a lot of the polling locations and a lot of the resources, not talking about the CDP, but when you change these districts and you change population size, resources it genuinely change. So what was the before and after once that change went into effect, the citizens of those sort of districts, those areas, was it more negatively or positively impacted?
By which metric?
By the metric of changing, because it seems unique with even Woodlawn or keeping Security Boulevard, which would be a more commercialized area that could potentially generate a large amount of money to ensure a lot of those things. And so similarly throughout the county map, I would assume that making sure that we have our 3 elements guaranteed by the VCR, the Voting Rights Act, or VCA, I apologize, that to ensure all of these things are proper, that then we can have the necessary allocation of funds, resources, et cetera.
I think I see what you're you're asking. So we did try and make sure that cultural institutions and major employment centers, that each district did still maintain at least a couple of them. It is actually pretty hard to make sure that that major employment centers and institutions are evenly distributed, simply because they aren't evenly distributed within the county. For example, Towson has, a major university, a smaller liberal arts college, and 3 regional hospitals. Unless you're willing to split Towson, there's not much you can do about that.
You're not going to get that everywhere.
But, UMBC is, one of the considerations is if we had done something similar to what the state legislative map did, how would we deal with UMBC? I think one of the reasons we didn't go that route was because we wanted, UMBC, while the institution itself, could be in one district, the population it serves, both students and faculty and staff, they're spread throughout that region. You'd be necessarily, even if you put the institution in one district, the population it serves would be in both. I think, and there was also some questions about Northwest Regional Hospital in what I think now is District 5. Like how, where should that go?
Yeah. And
yeah.
thank you for sharing. And I definitely bring that up. I'm looking at a lot of the data. Thank you for providing that. Just the major employers, right? Like they kind of go around the Woodlawn area. And so that was just a point of contention. I mean, we're going to go deeper, obviously, throughout, but I just wanted to just get clarity on that.
There is something else to consider, which is that the districts and this whole exercise is forward-looking. And I mean, this sounds kind of obvious, but it is important to realize that places like Security Square that right now, aren't doing a lot economically for the community, there's going to be a process. I mean, there already is a huge process on how to revitalize that area. And it's a good couple hundred acres that, I mean, the lifetime of the map that we come up with here will be 2026 to 2034. So by 2034, that area could see construction on Security Square could be substantially complete. The same thing, there's some revitalization, very early stages of, some sort of revitalization of East Point Mall in Dundalk. I'm not saying that will be done, but the person who represents that area between 26 and 34, that's the person who's going to help direct that kind of investment.
And I just want to be clear in terms of we're looking at the economic growth over in Dundalk and in regards to what could be with Security Boulevard and that infrastructure over that with the Security Mall. And so similarly, we need to make sure. Okay, just wanted to make sure, just ensuring that we can have representation to ensure that the benefit is going to go to those citizens. Thanks.
For what it's worth, I mean, just about every mall in the country and most of the malls in Baltimore County are experiencing some sort of economic downturn. And it's an ongoing question for every single member of the council, and it will be, continuing on, like how to revitalize those areas.
And actually, this isn't an endorsement at all, but there was a really good article in The Sun recently about the evolution of the malls. And it really went through, I thought at least, a very detailed discussion of where they're going and how they're trying to build a better mousetrap. And some of them are standing pat. And I know this isn't a discussion about economic development, but some of them are kind of standing pat. Some of them are completely going through a redo, and most of them I think are kind of in between. Not sure what they're going to do.
Thank you, that's all.
Any other questions? Well, like I said at the beginning, you're going to get, I'm going to send this PowerPoint to you tomorrow morning. Well, I'll say by tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow's kind of pretty busy, but you will get it tomorrow. And just so you know, Jen, we are hoping to have you at the next few meetings. So if you digest this, look it over, and have follow-up questions, she'll be here. Also, email. I mean, there's no reason we couldn't, answer some questions through email. And just, on the broader point, I do think that the questions indicate that you are thinking about this outside of meetings, but I think it's worth making sure to say, because of our aggressive schedule, I want to make sure you are actually reviewing materials outside. And if you have questions, please ask them. Don't wait for a meeting if you think it's important for the group to get an answer. We can always do things over email. So I want to go briefly to some of the other items on the agenda. Chris, can you pull up the slide at the public hearing one? So some of you have, probably most of you actually, have already been to at least one or multiple public hearings. But I just want to review the basic structure. Generally, we do introductions so that everyone who's attending knows who you are, knows who Tom and I are. Staff then usually gives just a table setting kind of brief introductory presentation. We're talking 5-10 minutes at the absolute maximum. And then you hear testimony from the public. The speakers do have to sign up online. I think is it 11 to 5? 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. the day of. And we take speakers in the order in which they signed up. We typically do 2 or 3 minutes. 3 minutes is kind of the default, but 2 minutes is kind of our, our backup for if there's way too many speakers for 3 minutes. I honestly don't know what to expect for this one. We'll find out. And for this particular one, we are taking speakers both in person and virtually. So you might hear people come to the microphone here, but you also might be directed to be looking at the monitors for someone online. That's pretty much it. The thing I didn't put down here, which is, it's kind of up to the group. Typically, we don't do kind of question and answer with individuals. You'll get, anyone who signs up to speak, you'll get contact information for them, like email or phone. So if there is something that you want to follow up individually, you can. But it's just one of those things where if the group starts doing question and answer back and forth, we end up with a 4-hour hearing. Okay, so next.
Quick question, reference to the speakers, or do you collect like their statements at all and get them out to us?
Yes, anyone who submits written testimony and they can, I mean, we'll accept anything, that's just, a letter. If someone wants to, I think the ACLU might come in and give us some sample maps. We're going to distribute those to you guys. Typically, it's the same thing with materials that you get at these meetings. So it'll be given to you probably the next day. And anything that we do collect written testimony wise will also be up on our website. So anyone else can see it.
Thank you.
Next slide, Chris. So the next issue is a commission chair. We kind of talked about this last time, but I think you guys are kind of at a crossroads. I need to make a decision whether you want to try and elect a chair this evening, or if you'd like to wait until February 26th. I really don't think you should wait beyond that because we're going to, again, with this aggressive schedule, we're going to be rolling through things. So I'll open it up.
Being that this is my first meeting here as commissioner, I move to make this decision on the 26th. I'm not sure how all my colleagues feel.
Cordell, I actually agree with you because Al isn't with us either. So I'd rather have us all here to do that.
Yeah, I agree with the 26, especially we have two commission members aren't here today. Plus, like Cordell said, we're just getting to know each other. So I think the 26 would be better.
Sound good? Okay. We'll make sure that is on the agenda for the 26th. If anyone would like to make a nomination beforehand, I think for the work group, we kind of did emails, where if somebody wanted to volunteer themselves or nominate someone else, just email the group. Nothing formal, just kind of what you think.
Besides the chair, are we going to have the co-chair also, like last time? Or we don't, or is it?
We are a slightly smaller group. I mean, that was 11 and this is 7.
Just in case the chair isn't at a meeting for some reason.
If you'd like.
One thing you can do is when you do get a chairperson, let's say for whatever reason that chair is unable to be at a meeting, I think the chair could designate, on a kind of an as-needed basis, someone without maybe the formality of a vice chair. But look, it's your commission, whatever you all think. If you'd like to have someone permanent kind of in place, that's up to you. But it seems to work for a smaller body that whoever the chair is, hey, I'm not going to be able to make the February 26th or the March 15th or whatever. Can Cordell? Well, you might be the chair, but can you, Ed? Can you take care of that? Yeah. So, but whatever you all think. But start thinking about it. I know it's only 2 weeks away, just about. But like Adam said, think about it. If you're interested, maybe sort of take the temperature of some of your colleagues and just talk about it, even via email.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, Tom and I can certainly answer them as well.
And it's a simple majority,
Okay, rolling right on to March meetings. So I have here are the days that do not work and some green dates that where we can schedule some possible meetings. You want to say something?
As part of that, so if you look at this calendar for March, you'll want to make a decision about the next 2 public hearings, because we're going to have one next week, and that's going to kind of be the table setter for the rest, because it's almost like what you're all going through as a group. You have a lot of data, but you're not really exactly sure how to do this yet and what to do. And the people that come to testify are going to be in kind of the same boat. They know what they want. They know what they want in their communities, but they're not exactly sure how this whole thing fits together. So the question I'm getting at is, for the two public hearings you're going to have in the future, do you want for both of them or one of them or whatever? Do you want to have a draft map that you can present so that when people come to testify, there's something that they can see that is a sample map, not the map that you're necessarily going to adopt, but at least a draft that you've put together. And so that'll impact when we have the next hearings. If you think it's a good idea to have a draft map in place, you know, then we'll probably do the next public hearing either later in March or maybe even 2 of them in April, you know, just so you all have at least a month or so to put a draft map together. So you don't have to deal with that right this second, but it's just something to think about when you decide on scheduling. But in the nearer term, what we're thinking about is 2 or 3 meetings in March, depending on what everybody's schedule is. And maybe not having a public hearing if you want to wait until you have at least a draft map for people to see. If you think that can be done in one public hearing later and you want to schedule one for March, and whether you have a map in place or not, that's something to think about. Thanks.
Just thinking about processes in the past and why one of the reasons that this commission was created. Personally, I think that it would be a good idea that we have some sort of draft map in place for the public to be able to see, be able to weigh in on, and be able to come back to us with their suggestions. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I too agree. I think a visual, if we can do a visual and a written, you know, people have different ways they intake information. And so we want to make sure everyone that's receiving the information is conceptualizing it and making an informed decision.
So I'm thinking the end of March should be our next public hearing. We already decided we was going to have one on the east side and one on the west side, right?
That's what we were kind of gearing toward.
And then, so I guess our next meeting, I mean, we might as well just go ahead and roll with it every other week. Every other week that's available.
Well, at least for my schedule, I'm just making sure because I do, you know, I'm still working with the law school. So I see that the 14th, we have a presenter that day.
So we're, Tom and I are working to get a presenter on Voting Rights Act and legal issues, an outside presenter. We actually just spoke to them today, and he gave us 4 dates, but any one of those 4 dates would work. As you can see, I did get back some bad dates for Ed and Eric.
I can rearrange my schedule.
Oh, okay, okay.
So nobody's available on the 6th or the 7th of March.
Or, yeah, it's the green are dates that are possible where everyone might be available.
Right, so that's why I'm saying we go week by week to see who's available. Is everybody available for Thursday, the 6th of March? Yes. Okay, so
I'm available.
I'm suggesting, because of time and we wanting to create a map before we have that public hearing at the end of March, that we go ahead and schedule it for the 6th. So I'm suggesting the 6th be the next meeting after our 26th meeting, is that right?
The 6th could be meeting number 4, public meeting number 4.
Also, to our meeting times, I moved to push it back from 5 o'clock p.m. to 6.
Yes.
I think that'd give everybody also ample time to at least get online.
I was going to say that too, because, you know, I got that. Got to be in the office every day now.
Splitting the difference, 5:30 rather than 6.
5:30 is good for me.
We could at least give it a shot.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can do that for the February 26th meeting, if you want. We change it to 5:30?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Wait, so I'm sorry, the
So the commission,
February 26th was when we were doing the public.
no, that's the 20th.
I'm sorry. I'm
no, that's
moving
all
too
right.
fast.
So the first public hearing is next Thursday, the 20th, and then meeting number 3, public meeting number 3 of the commission will be on the 26th of February at 5:30. And then I think based on what Ms. Tate Duffy said, commission meeting number 4 will be on Thursday, the 6th at 5:30. I would suggest perhaps the 19th be your next public meeting number 5, and that would be probably our Voting Rights Act presentation. And is that okay for everybody, the 19th? Okay.
And then which meeting would we be discussing the design of the map that we can present for the end of March?
Get that done early.
Yeah, so,
First week of March should be finalized.
or the first week of April, or the first week of April?
Or April, yes.
So maybe have the public hearing at the beginning of April, or at the end of March. What do you think? I mean, I guess if you have the public hearing the week of the 24th, you're giving yourselves a pretty good hard deadline to get at least one draft map in place. And that's, however aggressive you all want to be, we can be pretty nimble for you.
I personally think the public should wait until the first week in April,
Okay.
only because we haven't even broken ground on the map yet, really.
Right, and we don't even have the software yet. So why don't we?
Yes.
Yes, we're hoping. We are very cautious. We are cautiously very optimistic that we'll be ready to go on that in a couple of weeks. So we could shoot for perhaps the 2nd or the 3rd of April as a public hearing date. Does anyone have a preference?
Third.
Okay, the 3rd is a Thursday? Okay. So why don't, we'll sort of be tentative with that, but we'll pencil that in. April the 3rd, 25, public hearing.
So would that,
Matt?
in terms of, a meeting devoted to maybe drawing a draft map, okay, so we've got 2 March meetings set. One will be devoted to the Voting Rights Act presentation
On the 19th.
on the 19th. The other one will probably, it could either be completely devoted to talking about a draft map, or we could kind of split it and have half of it be a presentation from Rui Lavoie, our elections director, and then the other half be working on a map. Or if you wanted to be more aggressive on it, you could even schedule a 3rd meeting in March on that last week. That would be purely working on a draft map.
I think we should pick a day in the last week to focus solely on picking map. By then, we should know if we have the software, right?
Oh, yeah. You're going to have the software by then, and you're going to have time to work on it and time to follow up with questions by then, definitely.
So, thank you for suggesting that. I want to absolutely make sure this is done correctly and all of our input. So the last week of March is going to be a little tough for me. Yeah. So so in order to have my input, I mean, I'm not opposed to modify that if you guys want to offer an alternative date. I know that there's a spring break during the previous week. And then, yeah, so that would be March 17, 2025 through the 21st, 2025. And then, so I'm not opposed to that last week. It's just going to be extremely tough, but I'm open to maybe like early in the beginning, so maybe the 24th or something, the 24th or 25th, like within that week. If that is a possibility, if not, we can also make it tentative and then figure out more of a date that all of us agree on.
I don't have any issues with the 24th or the 25th. Does anyone else have an issue? No. All right, let's do it. Yeah.
24th?
Yep.
Let's do it.
And just so you know, we do offer, I mean, you can attend virtually if you wanted. It is a little bit more difficult, but then at least, you know, you're there and you can, you know, your voice can be heard.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
If you needed to.
Okay, so on the 24th, we're going to focus strictly on the map? Okay.
Yes. So again, just to recap quickly, March 6th, 2025, 5:30, meeting number 4. That'll probably be the Board of Elections, Ms. Lavoie, giving you a presentation. March the 19th, 2025 will be public meeting number 5, and we will have a Voting Rights Act presentation on that date. Then March 24th, we'll have a meeting that essentially will be devoted to map drawing. And then April the 3rd, we'll have a public hearing with hopefully at least, and again, this doesn't have to be a final product, but you'll have at least a draft map that the public can take a look at. And then, you know, one other thing to consider for you all, I mean, you can do this entirely how you like. You know, if you want our assistance in putting together a map and that you all can trim or completely change, that you could do it that way. Or if you all just want to start organically yourselves, you can do it that way too. You know, it's really, we're here to serve you, and whatever you're most comfortable with. You know, we want to lead you in the direction you want to go. We don't want to be leading the thing. You know, we're just here to take cues from you. But if you want our help, we're here to give it to you. So, and you don't have to make that decision right now either, just, you know, thinking about it.
If I can, sorry, did you have a question? Okay, I don't want to. If you could just give us a little bit of feedback on what that might look like. So it sounds like on the 28th, we're going to be exposed to the software. We're going to have access to it. Are we going to be able to take that software home or access it on our computer, draw maps at home, experiment with it? Like, what will that look like for us?
Absolutely what you just said. So hopefully on February 26th, which is 2 weeks and a day from now, when you're getting the demonstration on this product, this redistricting software, we'll ask you to bring your laptops or computers, and you will have an ability on these screens to see that software in action. And then you will have your own opportunities over the next month from February 26th until March 24th to experiment just exactly what you said. It's really pretty nice because back in the day when my first redistricting was 2011, and that was our first introduction to computers in doing this. But we only had one computer and it was in the council's library. And what would happen is a council or a commission member, Ed, would call and say, hey, Tom, I have a couple ideas on, District 5 or District 7. I'd like to come in and, do some mapping. Oh, okay. We'd call Tunde from planning or GIS, he was in GIS, and say, hey, we need you up here to work the computer. And he would get up there and and it was all computerized, but it was, hey, I want to move this line here and this one there and and he would do it. And it was very primitive in a sense, although at the time it was cutting edge. Now you don't need Tunde. You don't even need Atomari. You can do it yourselves. However comfortable you are with that. The flip side is if you're not so comfortable with it, and that's okay, you can have us do it. You can do it exactly the way we did it 10 years ago or whatever if you want. If you want us to, or if you want to send an email to us and say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, can you do it for me? We're happy to do it. I think it's much better, frankly, if you all do it yourselves because you can see in real time what you're doing. But yeah, it's pretty much what you described, yeah. And I only brought that other stuff up because it was just kind of, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was almost a generation ago, when you think about it technologically.
Yeah. If I can ask just one more question. So thinking especially about the area in which I'll be working on, it's going to impact my neighbors, it's going to impact Cordell, it's going to impact my friend, Rotunda, thank you. Can you talk to us a little bit about how in between meetings we want to make sure it's open, transparent. How can we collaborate with one another in between meetings as we're working on these maps?
The application itself has sharing functions. It works kind of like, it sounds a little weird to say this, but how like Google Docs, you can share it with somebody and, if you're both in it, have your own Google Docs up and you have it, the same one open, you can actually see like someone else. In the demo for the product, we actually saw them do something similar to that. One thing that I would suggest is when you collaborate, try to collaborate with 3 or fewer, because once you hit 4, it's a majority, and now it's subject to open meetings. So, which actually, honestly, it works out pretty well because groups of 3 tend to get each of the regions of the county pretty easily. But there's going to be, like there's draft maps that we can create that you can then share to everybody. And that's probably, when we actually get to this point in March, that's probably how we're going to do it. We're going to have a shared map or a couple of different shared maps that have options to them that you can then, as a group, look at and sit and debate. Yeah.
Very helpful, thank you.
If we can go back to that March 24th date, would anybody have a problem if we did the 25th instead of the 24th? I'm just going to be out of town and won't be back in time.
Tuesday instead of Monday.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So I just had a question. Did we figure out what side we're going to go to for the public hearing, the next one, the east or the west side?
That's a really good point. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather some of the suggestions that you all have given on locations and start looking at their availability like tomorrow and this week. And assuming both that some of these locations on both sides have availability, then you guys get to make a choice. If only one side of the county, some of the places have availability on that date, we kind of have to go with that side. And the meeting number 2, we'll have a little bit more lead time to schedule it, so we won't have that kind of problem. All right.
I have one other question for the previous members on the commission. What was the one thing you guys had ran into was an issue? Like the main thing? I'm just curious. The previous redistricting.
Well, the 2021 commission, I'll be honest, the number one problem is COVID.
A lot of things.
I mean, we had, it was 5 members, and, you know, I would say two or three of them, one in particular, the chair, was a very knowledgeable person, but also very used to doing things the kind of the pre-COVID way. And it just was very difficult in the height of, I mean, this was like, we didn't have the vaccine yet.
Well, and we didn't really know how to use the WebEx and
Yeah.
virtual stuff very well. We weren't very good at it yet, right? Remember, Chris? But I'll say this. I think the two things that stood out for me that made it harder were we did have, for whatever reason, when the commission was established 20 years ago, the council and the voters said, let's have a 5-person commission in a 7-district county council. And that made it harder because it's not like each one of you is in a silo, but you are kind of focused on the area that you're representing. And it was kind of hard to get that with 5 for 7. So that was one. And then 2, so we were very happy when the council decided, well, maybe it makes sense to have, one appointee for 1 council member. And then secondly, I think the technology, the last commission was really smart and really good, but, they weren't as technologically savvy in terms of the map drawing. And so that made it, just made it a little more difficult. So to the extent you all are willing to become proficient in this, you'll help yourselves, but you'll help us too. But again, like I said earlier, we're happy to do as much as you need us to do. Especially Adam.
Well, one thing I think is probably going to be a most important part. I mean, we know a lot, Al, myself, John, we know a lot about the east side. The west side, we're going to need help. I'm going to be honest, we're going to need help because we don't know the communities as well and the historical boundaries of certain things. And we're going to need your help with that and vice versa on our side. That's important.
And the other thing was, it was a lot easier when you were going from 7 to 7, but now we're going from 7 to 9. And that just throws a huge uncertain, dynamic in this. It's a lot easier to just say, okay, let's tweak the lines this way, let's account for population and demographics and Voting Rights Act. But, you're still dealing with apples to apples. Now we're dealing somewhat with apples and oranges. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I think that was needed because, again, people listening and watching, again, they have their conceptions of what was discussed and what was going on. And even for us to know what we, like you said, we need to learn each side, right? Don't assume just because I'm focusing on zone 1 that I don't need to know what's going on in the newer zone of 9 on the east side.
And I agree with you because if we just focus on ourselves, we're not going to get finished.
That's right.
I mean, we have to look at the whole county, and I think that's the most important part. And I'm ignorant. I'm going to admit it. Went to the west side, the needs and different things on that side. I mean, I go over there quite a bit, but I historically, I just do not know the information needed to make the right decisions. This is where you all come in.
Thank you. And I think we're all on the same page. I think collectively we need to work as a team, and we need to hear from our constituents. We need to hear from the people that live in these districts. So I think ultimately, with time passing, I think we have some good commission, right? I would agree.
I think we're gonna have a very good map, and I'm sorry, past people, I think we're gonna do better than you. I said, I think we're gonna do better than you guys.
What, from the 7th?
Yes. Because we're more, yeah. I think we're gonna do good.
I'm going to tell you, our group worked well together. I mean, granted, some people wanted up to 14 council districts. Oh, yes. It was out there, am I wrong? And, no, but we had a diverse amount and came to a decision with the 9 because it was split between some wanted 7, some wanted the 9 and the 11. And we came together to come up with the 9 with the possibility of making some change because we had it when we finished up. If the population grew to a certain point, it went to 11. But if the population decreased to a certain point, it went back to 7. I mean, that's how we came, so.
9 is a good number, though. It is a very good number.
One thing else I wanted to add, and it might be helpful, and I've already started doing it, if you get a chance to go to community meetings, associations around, out of your area, in fact, just go to some of these meetings, talk to the people, see their feelings. You'd be surprised. Because other people care. I'm going to tell you, a lot of people, it's not that everyone cares, don't get me wrong, but it's, you'll get some serious feedback from the individuals.
Thank you. Thank you for that advice. And I'm definitely I'm going to make use of that. And so I'm here to definitely learn from you all. And just as I'm learning, I think we are going to learn, and we're going to make this map the best map ever.
Just so you know, as we do have our Department of Planning liaison, if you want a list of community associations, in a particular district or something like
I would love that.
that, we can get that for you.
Thank you.
Can you just send it to all of us so we know? Heather?
I do not, but that is the exact reason we have our Department of Planning. Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, that would be really, yeah.
Already got everything we need.
Okay, well, unless anyone has any final questions, I think that is going to conclude our meeting. Yeah, just as a reminder, just because we are supposed to get bad weather this week, just in case, our bad weather policy is that we will move to virtual if the county offices are closed. So that will go for both the public, this upcoming public hearing on the 20th and any of the subsequent meetings.
Default is in person.
You sure we can't find a local pub someplace? We could get a lot done. We'll see.
Great.
All right, well, thank you all for your attendance.